So here in the minor chord, we've got 2 spaces, and over here in the major chord, we've got 3 spaces between the third and the root note. Hey guys, Bound to Divide here with Ableton Tips, and today we're going to be making your very first chord progression in Ableton Live 11. Okay, so when you first open Ableton, you should see this window in front of you, which is the session view. Today we're going to be working in the arrangement view, so just click on this button to get to the arrangement view. You can also hit tab on your keyboard, which will switch between those two. Our BPM by default is set to 120. We're just going to leave it there at 120, and we're going to be making a new MIDI clip on a MIDI channel. So you should already have a MIDI channel open over here. If you don't, you can create a new one by hitting Control, Shift, and T, and that'll add a new channel for you. Okay, so let's highlight 8 bars over here. That's 4 bars. We're going to do 8 bars because we're going to do an 8-bar chord progression. And then we create a new MIDI clip by hitting Control, Shift, and M. And now we need a sound for our chords. So we're going to be using the Ableton Live Grand Piano, which if you go into Instruments here, then go to Simpler, then go into Piano, you'll see Grand Piano ADG. Double click on that. And now if we double click on our MIDI clip, we can just drag this up so that we can see more of our piano roll. Then if we place down a note anywhere and drag it out, we should hear it. Okay, so it's pretty quiet and pretty dry. So I think I want to add a little bit of reverb to it. So I'm just going to turn up the reverb here to about 40%. And let's also just turn the volume up on this piano here. Volume doesn't go up very high, so we can also add a utility after this. I'm just going to search ut and then go to all results and double click on utility. Then I can just boost the gain a bit more by hitting the up arrow here. Okay, now we should be able to hear it nice and clearly. Okay, and then lastly, what I want to do before we get started writing the progression is in Live 11, it seems to default to 16th notes. So you can see this grid is really small and difficult to work with like this. I'm going to right click and just make it the narrow adaptive grid. And now we have some bigger blocks to work with. Okay, so we are going to be using scales in this, so you should already know what a scale is, and if you don't, we have courses on music theory, harmony, arrangement. They'll all be linked down below, so make sure you go and check those out, especially if you want to take a nice deep dive into music theory and kind of learn all the basic stuff I'm teaching here and more, and get like a really solid base for music theory. Okay, so the scale we're going to be working in today is going to be A minor, which is all the white notes, not the dark notes. So if we look at the piano here, you can see it's made with black and white notes, and we're only going to be using the white notes starting from A. So it just goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you'll see if we select all of these, I'm just going to Control C and Control V and then hit Shift and down so that we can just paste them down. You can see that's the same 7 notes down here as it is up there. So that A is the same as that A, the same as that A. It's just the same 7 notes repeated over and over again. So we're going to be working with all of these white notes. And you'll see that I spoke about 7 notes. I am also going to start talking in numbers now. I'm going to be saying things like we're going to be using a 1, 3, 6, 7 progression. And that means the first, or the root note of each chord that we're going to be using corresponds to the number in the scale. So for this chord progression, we're going to be using 1, 3, 6, 7. So let's just think about that. What is 1? What is the first note in A minor scale? So let's start on A because A is the first note. Then we're going up to the 3, which is going to be the third note in A minor. So let's take our next note, and I'm just going to hold down Control and click and drag to copy this note over. So then we're going to C, which is the third note in the scale. And then the next one is 6. So if you count up from 3, 4, 5, 6, that is the F, which is up here. But I don't want to play the F up there. I prefer to play it down low, because remember this is F and this is also F, and then we have another F down here. So we can play this chord wherever we want as long as we're starting on a F note. So the reason why I want to play this F down here is because I don't want this chord progression to just keep moving up. I want to have a bit of a difference in the contour of the chord progression. So when I say contour, I mean which direction is it moving. So I want it to move in opposite directions. So here we're moving up, then I want to go down, and then I probably want to go back up again. So we've got the 1, the 3, and the 6 now, and we're going to add a 7. If you're wondering how I came to the idea of using this chord progression, well, initially when I was learning music theory, I just went onto Google and I would search A minor chord progressions, and then I would see all of these number combinations and kind of just memorize them. So 1 3 5 7 is one of them that I remember. 1 3 6 7 6 4 1 5. There's just all these patterns that you can learn, and if you don't know any, then I'd recommend just going onto Google and just searching for your common chord progressions. And like I said, we've also got some courses on harmony, which would help you out greatly in this respect. So this is how our bass line sounds at the moment. Okay, now we're going to start building what's called a triad. So generally, when people talk about chords, they're talking about a type of a chord called a triad, and it's called a triad because it's made up of 3 notes. And you can build triads by just following a little simple method that I've been using since the beginning. And that method goes like this. So we start with our root note, which is our bass note here on A. And then we're still thinking in terms of our A minor scale. So we're going to be completely ignoring these darker lines here. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to copy a note, then we're going to skip a note and place a note. And then we're going to do that one more time. We're going to skip a note and we're going to place a note down. So now we've built our first triad, which sounds like this. And that triad is made up of our root note, our 3rd, and our 5th. And the reason this is called our 3rd is because it's the 3rd note up from our root note, and our 5th is our 5th note up from our root note. Now we can do that again with the C. So we're going to skip a note and we're going to place a note on the E, skip a note, place a note. And let's just do this on the other ones too. Skip a note, place a note, skip a note, place a note, skip a note, and place a note. Okay, so now our chords sound like this. Okay, so let's get back to a little bit of music theory here. You'll see there's 2 different chord shapes essentially that we have here. If I had to just move this chord down right next to our other one, you'll see there's 2 different shapes. This shape is our minor chord and this is our major chord. And the difference between the major and the minor chord sonically is that, or emotionally, is that the minor chord usually feels a little bit darker, a little bit more melancholic. And our major chord is a bit brighter, a bit more hopeful, a bit more uplifting. And the easy way when you're building a triad, the easy way to tell if it's a major or minor chord is to look at the number of notes between the root note and the 3rd. So here in the minor chord, we've got 2 spaces. And over here in the major chord, we've got 3 spaces between the 3rd and the root note. Okay, so now we've got this chord progression, and I like the sound of it, but it feels a little bit thin, and it also feels a little bit uninspired and boring to me. So I want to just spice it up a little bit. And the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to duplicate the bass notes, these root notes. I'm going to duplicate them and play them 1 octave down. Let's hold down Shift on our keyboard and just select all these bottom notes. And now I'm just going to hit Control-C, Control-V, and then hold down Shift after that and hit the down arrow. And now we've duplicated that and we have some bass notes. Okay, so now we're going to use something called chord voicing and voice leading to kind of create a little bit more smoothness and a bit more interest, give a bit more interest to these chords, which at the moment are being played in their most basic position. So as you already know, you can play any given note in any octave. So we can keep the sound of the chord and we can move notes into different octaves to create a bit more interest. Let's try that. So let's take this middle note, the C over here, the 3rd, and let's hold Shift and just move it up and hear how that sounds. Compare it to what it was. The chord is a bit brighter and fuller now, but it's still the A minor chord, and harmonically it's still serving the same purpose. It's just now we are focusing on that high C being at the top, and it's just given the chord a little bit of a different vibe. Okay, and we can fill this chord out even more by adding maybe another A in there, and it's still going to be a triad, it's still going to be the same A minor, but we're just adding another A. For our next chord, I want to turn this one into what's called a 7th chord. And if you remember, when we looked at the triad, we had a 1, a 3, and a 5 in there. But now we can add a 7 onto that chord. So if we just shift this up and add a B over there, that turns this into a C major 7th chord. And 7th chords are generally known to be a bit more jazzy and a bit more complex. And you'll hear the difference now when I play it, compared to without that note. It just sounds a bit more interesting now and has a little bit more emotion to it. So let's listen to how these chords sound now when they flow into each other. Okay, so that's sounding a bit more interesting now. Let's have a look at this chord. So the first thing I notice when I have a look at these visually is that there's quite a big jump in distance from these notes down to these ones. And we can fix that by using something called voice leading. Voice leading is just the concept where we take notes or chords and we play them, we revoice them like we've been doing with our first chord where we reshuffled the notes into different octaves. We essentially revoice the chord so that the last chord flows more smoothly distance-wise into the next chord, which just makes the chord progression, in my opinion, a little bit more, simplifies it first of all, and it also makes it feel a little more emotional. Okay, so let's take our 3rd over here and let's try shift that up an octave. Okay, so now we've shifted that up an octave, and now there's a bit of a less of a jump from this chord down to this one. We also have a C over here, which we've played previously in our first chord. So maybe it'll sound nice if we go from the C down to the B, back up to the C. So let's duplicate this C chord over here. I'm going to hit Control C and Control V, and then just hit Shift and up. And now we've got that C playing up in this octave too. And now we've kind of got this voice that's flowing along the top here, going C, B, C, which is it's quite an emotional movement because we're using this relationship between the notes, which is only one step, or in music theory, you would refer to this as a half step or a half tone. That half tone relationship is generally quite sad feeling or melancholic, which I really like. So I have a feeling that this movement will feel nice, kind of ebbing and flowing between these two notes. So let's listen to how this chord progression sounds now. Okay, so let's have a look at our last chord. We've got that B again in this last chord, so it might sound nice if we shifted that up an octave, and then we just keep this movement between the C and the B going. So essentially the top voice, this top row of notes is referred to as a voice. This voice is just going C, B, C, B, which is a nice repetitive, almost like a hypnotic movement in my opinion. And we've also got a G here, so let's try and duplicate that G and shift that up an octave. And that should kind of fill this chord out a bit more, and we've also now got a nice smooth movement between these two voices and these two voices. All right, let's listen to our chord progression. Okay, lastly, what I like to do with my chord progressions is to just kind of try out a different sound, like maybe a pad sound on them, to see how the chord feels with different instruments. Once I'm happy with how it sounds on a piano, that's what I generally do. I'll try out different instruments. So let's go into sounds here. Let's go to pads, and let's check out this Atmos pad. And we're going to use this Atmos pad on our chord progression. So let's just double click on that. And we might need to turn down the volume of this. So I'm just going to turn this utility off down here. Okay, I think that sounds really nice. If you want to take a deeper dive into music theory, make sure to check out the courses linked below. We've also got another tutorial, which is a follow-up of this, where we're going to be writing a melody based on this chord progression. So if you want to know how to write melodies and you're still new to music, make sure you go and check out that tutorial. I'll see you there. Thanks. Bye-bye.